today's video, we'll be making a button front v-neck dress. You're going to start off with a front bodice block, and there's links in the description below. Then mark where you want the new dart to be on the block, and we're going to start the new dart in the waist. Trace from the old dart to the new dart leg, and then pivot at the bust point, closing the old dart, and trace the rest of the bodice. And then we're going to draw a fold line across the bodice, and then fold, and then draw in that sort of curved shape under the bust, and I'll include like a little sketch here just so you know kind of the shape you're going for. Then you're going to open it up and cut along the new line, like separating the two pieces. Next, you're going to close and tape the dart on the bottom piece. Now here I'm closing the shoulder dart, and I just kept this in again just in case anyone needed it. So cut out the bottom dart and fold away the excess. We're not going to need this dart later, so it's not a big deal how it looks. And then I'm going to go in 1 inch at the neckline and then connect that to the center front corner. Draw a line perpendicular to the new neckline connecting to the bust point. So just cut along that line and leave like a hair attached so you can still rotate it. And we're going to pull it up 1/4 of an inch and then tape it down. Preferably use a different color to reconnect the new corners so that you can see where the new neckline is. Then I measured and divided the shoulders into 3 sections. This is for the tucks. And then I'm going to redraw that perpendicular line, and I'm going to connect the section marks to the new line. And then I'll just cut along those. And you want to make sure that the horizontal line is still connected at the corners so you can pull it sort of up and down. And you're just going to gently pull down on that lower section to open up the horizontal line and also spread out the tuck lines. Now the left side tuck is going to be 1 1/4 inch, and then the right side tuck is going to be 1 1/16 inch. You can obviously change this for yours if you want them like less severe, more obvious kind of thing. Just depends on how much you're able to like open up the pattern piece. I'm going to transfer that onto a new piece of paper with a tracing wheel. Here I'm outlining it with pen. The only thing I did by accident was trace the dart. You don't need the dart anymore. The dart is just ignore it. And you're just going to use little marks we made earlier, sort of notches, to define where the gathering line is going to go. And for the tucks, make sure you just stop them 1 inch and 3/4, and then put little arrows so you know to like pull the fabric together there and stop at the end of the 1 inch or 3/4. And then I added 1/2 inch all the way around. We're going to do the same steps for the bottom piece, trace, and then make sure you mark the notches. They're not super important for when you're putting it together, but it might help just get sizes right. And then add that 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now I'm doing a button extension, and mine ended up being 5/8 an inch, but yours might be different depending on the button size you use. So here I just did some iron-on interfacing to where the button extension would be, but made it 2 inches just so I had a little extra. And then I only sewed along the center front button extension and along the top of that, remarking out the tucks just because I didn't when I was cutting the pattern out. But it is easier to do it beforehand, so just sort of pinch the fabric together and pin it. And this is kind of like sewing a dart, just not fully finishing it, and it's more just parallel lines instead of coming to a sort of point. Also, don't forget to gather the bottom where the 2 notches, just from notch to notch, and use a longer stitch length so you're able to pull it through. So just gather up the bottom piece and try to match that size to the bottom piece. And I did the same steps on the lining and just matched the size again. Now you're going to pin the pieces together. Now you're going to pin the pieces together and just sew along the neckline. We're going to leave the sides open so it's sort of easier and less bulky sewing things together. I also serged all of the raw edges, and if you don't have a serger, you can just use a zigzag stitch, or sometimes some machines have special overlocking feet that you can get. So here I'm just doing the back darts. I just followed how the bodice block was in the download. So it was pretty simple, just darts using the thread as a guideline. Next, I'm pinning the side seams together, front and back, right sides together, and just sewing along that 1/2 inch. And then sewing the shoulders together. So I didn't show this on camera just because it's sort of hard to film, but I did cut out 2 circle skirts. One was the self fabric, so the patterned fabric, and then the next one was lining. And I think they were about the same length. The lining was a little bit shorter, but I have a calculator down below for circle skirts because it's really just folding the fabric, cutting out the smaller circle, and cutting out along the bottom. And then I just cut up along the middle to create that sort of buttonhole extension area. Make sure to add a few inches in your waistline. So here I'm just pinning the lining to the self fabric and did the same fusing along the button extension too. Now I turned it inside out and just did sort of an edge stitch at 1/8 inch just to keep things together when you're sewing on the top. Here when I tried to pin the bodice to the skirt, I was having issues that they weren't the same length, so I ended up adding gathers to the top. I guess you could do that to the skirt too if that was kind of the reverse issue, but just make sure that either one of them are fitting you. You can always let out sort of where you sewed the button extensions together. That's what I ended up doing. Since I did it at 1/2 inch, I could like open it up 1/4 inch. Measure the armhole, and we're gonna put that in the circle skirt calculator and kind of make a mini circle skirt for the arms. And you're gonna have to cut this so it's like going straight, because one side will be longer if you just sew it right on the armhole. So we're gonna sew it on and then cut the bottom edge straight, but I'll show that in a different clip. Next, pin the sleeve to the armhole. I had a lot of, I had to ease it in a lot because they weren't really the closest sizes, but it ended up working out. And I found when I was sewing, I wasn't super upset or whatever if there was little tucks in there, because since it was so flared, you just weren't able to see those sort of mistakes, so it all kind of blended in. So for this, you can be a little bit less careful. So really quickly, I just used this hem measure thing on my dress form, but you can literally just hold up a ruler, press it on the floor, and drag it around the skirt to get that even hem. Now I'm just roll hemming that. What I did was serge it and then rolled it once and just sewed on top, because I find when I double roll it, it just gets really sort of wavy and wonky. But if you're gonna do that, I think maybe just zigzag stitching and folding it up works well too, or an overlocking stitch. So here I just straightened out the arms. Mine didn't end up even, but they still looked good, so just make sure not to take off too much at once like I did. And I'm just hemming the sleeves the same way as I did the skirt. Next, I'm marking the buttonholes, and I had to mark them like while I was sort of wearing the dress, because at the top button it needed to be a little bit further away to pull in the pieces so that the very middle matched up, but then along the waistline seam it had to be a little bit closer to just bring everything together. And then I just marked the middle button in between the two. Just hand sewing on the buttons, pretty easy. So I laid out the buttons how I want, like kind of the distance I wanted them to go, and then measured from the waist button to the bottom button middles of like how long that distance was, and then divided it up the amount of spaces in between those buttons, if that makes sense, and then just put little dots for that. For the buttonholes, I marked from the middle of the buttons 5/8 an inch away from the other side where the buttonholes would be, and then I marked 1/4 inch above that dot, and then 5/8 inch down from that dot to create that buttonhole opening. You just want it your buttonhole plus a 1/4 of an inch. Now I'm just sewing the buttonhole, and just use your machine's guide on how to do it. It just depends, and you can always hand sew it, I believe, with embroidery thread or something. I'll try to find a tutorial for you guys. And all you have to do now is just cut open the buttonholes, put it on the dress, button it up, and you're done. Thank you so much for watching, so much for subscribing. You guys have been really patient because I had been away at uni and haven't posted as much, but thank you for being patient. I have like videos lined up to go, so I'll keep you updated and show little previews here and there. Bye!